You know, I didn't expect to be emotional for the prospect pyramid this year, but I am. This is definitely going to be one of the last videos I ever shoot in this room, and it might be the last video I ever shoot in this room. And now instead of shooting this video I put a lot of research into, I want to lay down and cry. Usually I have to wait till April or May for that, but never mind. We're going to talk about the Leafs prospects in the prospect pyramid. And I gotta tell ya, I'm doing something. I'm doing something with this one, and some of you are going to disagree. Before I get into story time, here's what the prospect pyramid is. Some people who write about prospects, they rank a team's prospect 1 to 10, 1 to 20. It doesn't matter, and it's all good, but that's not the way I like to do it. The way I like to do it is tiers, because you never really know how it's going to shake out. Like, for example, take your team, whoever you cheer for, maybe it's the Leafs, and someone gets hurt. Well, who are they going to call up? Because the answer isn't always as simple as, oh, whoever the next best player is. Like, what if Nylander gets hurt? You're going to want someone with some scoring. What if Engvall gets hurt? Well, you're going to need someone to help on that penalty kill. Just how you might call up a different defenseman, whether it's Morgan Rielly or Jake Muzzin getting hurt. Or even TJ Brody, because even though he's left-handed, he plays the right side. He might even be, probably is, their top right D. So I don't know if it's as simple as 1 to 10 or 1 to 20. I put them into clumps, or maybe clubs, because clumps is, that word is, no, not much use for that word anymore. We can do away with it. We don't need it. So what I did a number of years ago for the first ever prospect pyramid is I arranged it by tiers. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4, Tier 5, and then everybody else. This year I was ruthless. I had players on my list in Tier 5, just wiped them right off. But I'm also doing something different this year. There is a player in the Leafs prospect pyramid in Tier 2. Two big factors went into that. Number one, I'm correcting something from the first year. The first year I did this, it was Matthews' rookie season. He hadn't played a game in the NHL yet. He was Tier 1. Marner and Nylander were Tier 2. With that as the standard for most of the history of the prospect pyramid, I just haven't had guys in Tier 1 or 2. But realistically, most teams, if you have a player as good as Mitch Marner in your prospect system, they're probably number 1 or Tier 1. Nylander would be at least 2, like a high-end 2. And the other thing is, when it comes to the prospect pyramid, I speak to people in and around hockey when I'm coming up with my tiers. Some of those people are going to be in this video offering their analysis. Others are top secret, and I'm not telling you. Real quick before we start the prospect pyramid, because we're going to be here a while. Want to bet? You can do it at Sports Interaction, Canada's sportsbook. Football is back, baseball is around the corner, and hockey has games that count around the corner. Bet pregame, live in play are one of our many prop bets. Made for Canadians by Canadians, Sports Interaction makes it easy to deposit, play, and cash out. Join now and see all sports betting has to offer. Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. That's sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. Ontario only, and please remember 19 plus. Please play responsibly. And one person in particular, I showed that Matthew Knies was in Tier 3, and they said absolutely not. So we're gonna start. Nobody in Tier 1, you already knew that. There's no Austin Matthews in the system. But in Tier 2, Matthew Knies. Now in Leafs Nation, we have a tendency to get overly enamored with second-round picks that were slept on because, well, for a lot of Kyle Dubas' tenure, they haven't had first-round picks. But the hype around Matthew Knies is different than the hype around Nick Robertson was. We'll get to Nick Robertson in a moment, but Matthew Knies is legit. Monster at the World Juniors, was on the American Olympic team with no NHL players at the Olympics last year, and he just wrecked the NCAA. I think part of what has people so excited about him, he's 6'3", 209 pounds, and he's still 19. He doesn't even turn 20 until next month. Second on the University of Minnesota with 33 points and 15 goals last season. And the guy he was second to is Ben Myers, who is a Colorado Avalanche prospect who is 4 years older. The big talk about Matthew Knies was that he could help the Leafs last year. He's chosen to go back to the NCAA to play with the University of Minnesota this year. I think he's going to compete for the Hobey Baker, assuming he stays healthy. He's going to wreck shop, and hopefully, once the season's done, he can join the Leafs, and the answer to who takes up that second line left wing spot could be him. Is he going to be a super duper duper star? I don't know. But you look at the way the Leafs cap situation is, they have pillars on this team. They have Tavares, they have Marner, they have Rielly locked up long term, and obviously they're going to try, and it sounds good, sounds like they're going to be able to lock up Austin Matthews, at least for the foreseeable future. You need contributors, and even though the Leaf system doesn't have a super duper star in there, at least it doesn't look like that way right now, Matthew Knies can come in and be a huge part of the Leafs, hopefully trying to contend. So, since he's the only guy in Tier 2, that's it. We move on to Tier 3. And for Tier 3, I want to start with Nick Robertson, a prospect who was probably a little bit overrated for a while, and now he's grossly underrated. I feel like I always have to do this with Nick Robertson. He just turned 21. He had a goal-scoring touch with the Peterborough Petes of the OHL, and because he was the youngest player in his draft year, he was just a few days removed from going the following year, and people were like, oh, well, he could have been a first-rounder in the next draft. Then what happens? He scores like 55 goals, and like he was a goal a game in the OHL, and the only thing that stopped him, COVID. And he sticks with the Leafs in the bubble, and he scores in Game 3 against the Blue Jackets, and everyone's very excited. Everything that has happened since has been nightmarish. This dude who scored over 50 goals in the OHL and was still eligible to play another season in the OHL, played in this weird situation where he was a teenager, a North American teenager in the AHL, which usually isn't allowed. And for 2 seasons now, he's battled injuries. Last year, he had a cup of coffee with the Leafs. He did score a goal, and that was fun. It was a nice pass from Nylander. But again, in the AHL and being injured in the AHL, out of sight, out of mind. But he scored 16 goals in 28 games with the Marlies last year, for a goals per game of 0.57 in the AHL. No one else on the Marlies was even half a goal a game. And in the 28 games he played, he had 28 points. No other Marlie who played at least 10 games with them last season was a point-a-game player. Again, he just turned 21. I know it's frustrating, and I know Leaf fans want him on the team. Ooh, could he have the second-line job with Tavares and Nylander? I don't know if he's ready for that, but if he doesn't make the team right away, it's not a disaster. This guy could be a Leaf full-time out of camp by the end of the season, or even if it has to wait until next year, I think that's perfectly fine. He's a second-round pick. He's had to battle injuries. He had the awful COVID experience like a lot of prospects his age. Don't sleep on Nick Robertson. For our next prospect, we have Rodion Amirov. And speaking of how young Nick Robertson is, he just turned 21. Rodion Amirov, who was drafted the next year, is about to turn 21. Can't really tell you much about Amirov's KHL stats from last year. He did play. And with Amirov, I would ask people to exercise caution, because not everyone knows this. You're going to look at where he was drafted, 15th overall, and you're going to see prospects who were drafted after him, who are starting to make it into the NHL, make an impact, and oh, the Leafs screwed this pick up. Well, no. Amirov was a good player, an emerging player in the KHL with Salavat Yulayev. Then he was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Again, a lot of people don't know that. He is back skating with Salavat Yulayev, which is a huge step in his recovery. He's a great two-way player, but patience is key with Amirov. This is going to take some time. Last player in Tier 3, and I've sorted this in no particular order, but I do have forwards ahead of defensemen. Topi Niemela. Right-handed D, we already like that. He is definitely the best prospect the Leafs have on D. Nearly had the World Junior gold medal winning goal, except he was robbed by Mason McTavish. He's just 20 years old, had 32 points, 10 of them were goals in Finland last year in 49 games. He's 5'11", 170 pounds, so pretty average height, and he could put some more weight on the frame. Interesting little wrinkle is that even though he's on loan in Finland right now, he is under NHL contract with the Leafs. Does that mean a North American cameo at the end of his season in Finland? We'll see. But right now, he's putting up a lot of points as a defenseman in a league where it's kind of hard to get points. For most of his career so far, he's essentially been a boy playing against men. This season, we're looking for another step. And that's it for Tier 3. We had one guy, Matthew Knies, in Tier 2, so that leaves 3 guys in Tier 3. Oh, so now we're all the way down to Tier 4. That must mean the rest of the Leafs prospects are bums! No. I always remind people, I had Zach Hyman in Tier 4 in the first prospect pyramid, and I stand by it, frankly. Like, he was a good Leaf, and then he became a very good Leaf, and then last year in the playoffs with the Edmonton Oilers, he hit this gear that I think even Zach Hyman fans didn't know he had. But when I ranked him in tier 4, he hadn't yet shown that this was there. He showed in university hockey and in the AHL that he was a responsible guy, gritty, hard-nosed, hard-working, and he should play in the NHL, but top 6, obviously he's exceeded all of those expectations, but those are the sorts of guys you can find here in tier 4. Are they going to score 50 goals for you? Probably not, but you can find steady bottom 6, maybe even middle 6 guys who can regularly put up 15, 20 goals for you if they're a forward and be a second or third pairing guy on D. Oh, and goalies. Holy cow, the goalies. We'll get to them at the end of tier 4. Starting tier 4, we have Alex Steeves, who, for selfish reasons, I really hope makes the Leafs. It's Steeves! You might remember him from his very brief stint with the Leafs last year. He had an assist in 3 games. He's still only 22. He'll turn 23 in December. 6 foot, 196 pounds, so at very least an average frame. Scored a goal in his first preseason game with the Leafs. Yeah, it went off his leg, but that's because he was standing in the right spot. And on a Marlies team last year that frankly wasn't very good, he was pretty good. 23 goals, 23 assists for 46 points in 58 AHL games. Honest to goodness, I think this guy's a dark horse to make the Leafs out of camp, especially with Engvall potentially missing some time. It doesn't sound like he is, but if he does, Steeves, I think, could play in the lineup. Maybe he's on the 4th line. Who knows? By the end of the season, if he does really well, again, I keep bringing up that 2LW spot. It's there. And you might be rolling your eyes going, Steve, you really think that's a good idea? I didn't say it was a good idea. I'm just saying that he's good enough that the Leafs might try it. Whether it works out or not, well, that's up to him. Another guy potentially up for that spot, Nick Abruzzese. 23-year-old, finished his college hockey days last season and then joined the Leafs for 9 games. He only scored 1 goal in those 9 games, but I saw it live! That was at the last game of the season against the Boston Bruins that wasn't really a regular season game, even though it counted. Nobody played. Matthews scored his 60th the game before against Detroit. Sit this one out, Austin. Second on Harvard in scoring last season with 33 points in 29 games. He'd be an interesting fit for the Tavares Nylander spot because he was a playmaking player. Lots of assists. Yes, I know he played up the middle, but it's easier to go from center to wing than wing to center. I don't really see this guy making the Leafs out of camp, but he could play some games this season, and he needs to put up big numbers in the AHL. Speaking of which, if Abruzzese and Nick Robertson both end up in the AHL, Abruzzese to Robertson could be something special to watch. Next in tier 4, a fresh face, and I was actually told I was wrong by someone I spoke to for putting this player in tier 4. This person said he needs to go in tier 3 because he's that good. Fresh draft pick, Fraser Minton. And a summer baby, again, one of the younger players in the 2022 draft. The Leafs love that. They did it with Robertson, Semyon Duragachintsev, and now they do it with Fraser Minton. Except unlike Nick Robertson and Semyon Duragachintsev, this guy is 6'2", 38th overall pick in this past draft. He played center in the Leafs' recent preseason game. I'm not sure what day you're going to see this. 20 goals, 35 assists for 55 points in 67 WHL games last season. Why did it have to be 67? And he had a strong showing in the WHL playoffs with the Kamloops Blazers, 16 points in 17 games. Up next in tier 4, another 2022 draft pick, and this one made me laugh when it was announced. According to EliteProspects.com, he's a center/right wing, Nick Moldenhauer. The reason I laughed at the player drafted 95th overall by the Toronto Maple Leafs had nothing to do with the player, other than he plays for the Chicago Steel. It's a meme within Leafs Nation that Kyle Dubas loves drafting guys from the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds. Creeping in there over the last few drafts, he loves the Chicago Steel. And that's not just players, it's like members of the organization. Greg Moore, who's the coach of the Toronto Marlies, came from that program. But some people are pretty excited about this guy. And that includes Kyle Cushman of TheLeafsNation.com.
Nick Moldenhauer was one of my favorite third-round targets for the Leafs coming into the draft, and when they were able to trade down and still get him at the 95th overall pick, I was ecstatic. There's a lot to like in Moldenhauer's game. He's a good skater and a dual threat offensively who can score in and around the net, but is also a good playmaker as well. He put up 43 points in 41 games with USHL Chicago this year, and he did that despite some serious setbacks early in the season. For starters, he lost a lot of his offseason work with a mono-like virus in the preseason that cost him the first 15 games of the season when it went undiagnosed, and had a lot of issues with that. And then when he was finally able to return to the ice in late October, on the very first shift of a season, an errant skate blade hit him in the face that required emergency surgery, a blood transfusion, and 175 stitches. So some serious setbacks early in the year for Moldenhauer, and he was still able to come back and put up 43 points in 41 games. If he was able to do that despite missing essentially the first 2.5-3 months of the season with all of those setbacks and still put up a point per game, I'm very excited to see what he can do this year, hopefully with a fully healthy year, be a leader on one of the best teams in the USHL, and really show that he probably should have been at least a second-round pick in last year's draft.
Thank you very much, Kyle, and we'll hear from him again later in this video. Next Leaf prospect up. This guy, I think, sort of fits the Zach Hyman mold that I was talking about. Roni Hirvonen. I'm not comparing him to Zach Hyman in terms of playing style. I'm comparing him to Zach Hyman in terms of, does he have a tremendously high ceiling? I don't think so, but I think he could be a very useful NHL player for a long time. You might have seen his handiwork at the World Juniors with Finland, 7 points in 7 games. He was really good in that tournament. 9 goals, 17 assists for 26 points in 46 games in Finland. And even though he's playing in Finland to start this season, just like Topi Niemela, he is signed to an NHL contract with the Leafs. He's just 5'9", 172 pounds, but he doesn't really play like it. He had a good showing in the Finnish playoffs last year, even though it was brief. Hopefully that doesn't become a trend with the other team he plays with that wears blue and white. Next guy up in Tier 4 is a really interesting player. Listen, when Dubas joined the Leafs, I wanted him to hit on late picks because I'm a nerd and I had heard he was as well. With this player, he just might have done that. He was on the prospect pyramid last year because he had an amazing showing in the Swedish Hockey League playoffs. He was playoff MVP Pontus Holmberg. He had a nice but brief debut with the Toronto Marlies, and who knows, he could end up on the Leafs sooner than you think. Here to talk a little bit more about Pontus Holmberg is Armand Panthaki from Game Over Toronto on STPN.
There's actually a lot to like about Holmberg's game that could translate really well into the NHL level. He's capable of making that quick, smart, simple play in tight. He's creative with his passing, and for his size, he's actually really good at puck protection to keep possession while under pressure. He doesn't have the offensive flair or flashiness that some higher-end prospects may have, however he's proven to be a pretty productive playmaker while also having the two-way hockey sense and defensive responsibility. Overall, he's shaping up to be a very all-around player, however the only thing he's missing is the finishing talent. Even doubling his production in his 2022 season from his 2021 season, he only actually got 2 more goals. Most of the increase in production was through assists, which was already an asset of his even in his draft year. I see a high probability of him getting bottom 6 minutes in the NHL sooner than later, and this year will be a huge test for him to see if he translates really well to North American ice with his first full season in the Marlies.
Thank you to Armand. I'm really excited to see this player. Leafs already gave him a chance with William Nylander in the preseason. That's pretty big. Up next in Tier 4, fascinating guy, Ty Voigt. So he was drafted by the Leafs in 2021 with a late pick, and the Leafs only had 3 picks, and they chose to use one on Ty Voigt, who did not play a game in the 2020-2021 season, his draft year. Obviously, the Leafs had done some work and scouted him beforehand, and he made enough of an impression that they took a flyer on him. Last year, he showed the Leafs why they were right to pick him. Because yes, 5'9", 151 pounds, rolls eyes, but he only just turned 19, so that 151 may not stay that way. But also, in 67 games played with the OHL Sarnia Sting, he had 26 goals and 54 assists for 80 points. Those 80 points are made much more impressive by the fact that the next highest scoring member of the Sarnia Sting only had 59. This wasn't a case of the team had some superstar who didn't play or anything. The top 4 scorers all played 65 or more games. Last season, the Sarnia Sting might not have been great, but Ty Voigt was. keep an eye on him. Speaking of nerding out on late round picks, Ryan Twerberg. I still remember the Leafs making this pick. This was the 2020 draft. You might remember that one for going 15 hours. Not literally, but it felt like it. The Leafs made a trade with the Boston Bruins in the 7th round to get the pick to draft Ryan Twerberg, and I remember watching that and going, he better be good. Well, he's worked his way into the World Juniors conversation for Canada. Here, once again, to talk about Ryan Twerberg, Kyle Cushman from TheLeafsNation.com.
Ryan Twerberg is one of the biggest risers year over year in the Toronto Maple Leafs organization. Coming into last season, he had played barely over a dozen games in the NCAA as a bottom 6 forward, and before that had been a good player in the OJHL, but fairly unremarkable career there. So coming into that season, when he put up essentially a point per game over the course of the season and was electric in the early part of the year, he really put himself on the radar as a legitimate prospect in the Leafs organization. In fact, he actually got a call to Team Canada camp for the World Juniors despite being a 7th round pick just a year prior, and was actually one of the final cuts of that original December camp as well. For Twerberg, there's a lot to like in his game, and believe me, I called him one of your favorite prospects that you don't know about yet for essentially all season last year as part of the TLN Prospect Roundups, and I still think that remains true. For the new school crowd, there's a lot to love in his skating ability, transition skill, and his ability to create rush chances out of essentially nothing. And for the old school crowd, well, he's essentially a bull on ice. He loves to drive to the net, he likes to get chippy, hit anything that's in his way, and there's a lot to love in the way he plays hockey, both off the puck, aggressively on the forecheck, but also when he has the puck in creating rush chances in his transition ability. So for Twerberg coming into this season now at UConn for his junior season, he's going to have to step up even more with a lot of their top talent moving on as they turn pro over the past year. So for Twerberg, he's going to be a leader at UConn this year, but if he takes another step offensively, rounds out his game defensively, and becomes more of a primary penalty killer as well, there's a legitimate chance that he could turn pro at the end of this season.
Moving on to defensemen in Tier 4, we have Mikko Kokkonen. Playing a little bit of preseason with the Leafs right now, 6 foot, 201 pounds. At the end of 2020-2021, he had a brief stint with the Toronto Marlies that was unusually productive. He had 1 goal and 6 assists for 7 points in 11 games. And I say unusually productive because the next season that he played in Finland, he had just 1 goal and 14 assists in 58 games. For a while now, the Leafs have had a number of players in Europe that you look at and you go, oh, I can't wait to see them play on North American ice full time. Mikko Kokkonen's time has arrived. Very excited to see what he can do. Our next defenseman has an interesting relationship with North American ice. Philip Kral. Again, he's playing a little bit of preseason with the Leafs right now. 6'2", just under 200 pounds. Last season with the Toronto Marlies, he played his first full season of professional North American ice hockey. And I put that distinction because his previous professional experience was in the Czech League, but before the Czech League, he played in the WHL. He's a 2018 fifth, 21 points in 58 games as a D-man on the Marlies back end. I was actually told that even though I had him in Tier 4, that I had Philip Kral too high. Yes, he can put up a few points, some questions about his defensive game. Keep an eye on that going forward in the preseason. And now we get to the goalies, and all of them are in Tier 4. Some of them because they have a higher likelihood of making it, but not the highest likelihood of becoming a starter. Others because they do have a bit of a higher chance of eventually becoming a starter, but they're years away or they just haven't really shown it yet. It's just potential. First is Erik Källgren, and I'm not going to lie, I don't think he should be on this list. He was 8-4-1 with the Leafs last season, 15-8-1 with the Marlies last season. With the Leafs, he was just an 8-8-8, and to be honest, I was surprised to read that because I actually thought he was pretty decent. I have a feeling that one game where the Leafs just fed him to the Wolves against the Lightning screwed his save percentage because I don't remember him being an 8-8-8 goalie. He didn't seem that bad. But the reason he probably shouldn't be on this list is he's about to turn 26, which is older than the Leafs' current tandem goalie, Ilya Samsonov. What I do like about Erik Källgren, on the other hand, is maybe the Leafs won't lose a goalie this time on waivers. Isn't that great? Källgren to me seems like the perfect candidate for a third stringer. You can call him up, send him down, and if he becomes your backup for a little while, it should be okay, and we know it should be okay because we've seen it be okay. Even though he was an 8-8-8, he was still 8-4-1. If the team goes 8-4-1 but over an 82 game season, they'll make the playoffs. That's fine. But then we get into some murky water with our next guy, Joseph Woll. If you watch these previous prospect pyramids, you know I was pretty high on Joseph Woll for a while, but a lot of out of sight, out of mind with him. He's 24, he's injured again, and that's why he's not playing in any preseason games right now. And had it not been for an injury, because Joseph Woll played fine in his brief cup of coffee in the NHL with the Leafs, Källgren wouldn't have played. But now it seems pretty obvious that Källgren has surpassed Joseph Woll as the third stringer, and now Woll is maybe the fourth stringer, maybe battling for games on the Marlies with Källgren. And that's not even counting Keith Petruzzelli and Dryden McKay, who are on AHL contracts with the Marlies. It's going to be hard for Woll to find games. I still like him, but he's got to have a big season, because not only are those guys on AHL contracts going to push to get NHL contracts, but a bunch of European goalies are going to come over very soon. Speaking of which, 4th round pick from 2022, Dennis Hildeby. He was the first player signed to a contract who was drafted in 2022. Oh, it's weird that the Leafs would sign an 18-year-old goalie so fast. Well, that's because he's not 18. He actually turned 21 in August. But there's a reason the Leafs drafted him. There's a reason the Leafs drafted him in the 4th round as well. They didn't wait. They didn't sign him as a free agent. This guy was going to go. Other NHL teams believed in Dennis Hildeby enough. So he is signed to a contract with the Toronto Maple Leafs, but he's on loan in the Swedish Hockey League with Färjestad. We'll see how he does this season. If the Marlies make the Calder Cup playoffs, that could be a real crowded crease. We end Tier 4 with the curious case of the Leafs' 2 Russian goalies. We start with Artur Akhtyamov, who I've been high on for a while, but a little bit of drama. So again, there's 3 leagues, the KHL, which is like the Russian NHL, then there's the VHL, which is basically the minors, and the MHL, which is more of a junior league. Akhtyamov played mostly in the VHL, so in the minors. His season wasn't the most wonderful, frankly. He was 9-17-9 with a 912 save percentage, which was the second best save percentage on his team. And I want to go to the next Russian goalie, Vyacheslav Peksa, because it actually ties back to Akhtyamov. So Peksa just turned 20. He was a 6th round pick in 2021. Last season he played mostly in the MHL, so Akhtyamov was in the minors in the VHL. Peksa was in the lower league, but he killed it. 936 save percentage and a record of 30-17-8. Then Peksa was a 919, which is still pretty good, in 13 MHL playoff games. Now, why does that matter? Why am I bringing that up? Well, because Akhtyamov and Peksa were actually in the same system. And toward the end of his VHL season, Akhtyamov got demoted to the MHL, where surely he'll take over as the starting goalie, right? No. In the very same playoffs where Peksa put up a 919 in 13 games, Akhtyamov was an 869. I had to hold up my paper to make sure I was correct, and 0-2. Same team. Now, the good news is both goalies are off to fantastic starts this season. Peksa once again in the MHL and once again killing it. He is 3-1-1 with a 943 save percentage. But Akhtyamov is back in the VHL where he has a 2-2-1 record, which isn't as good, but a 965 save percentage so far, which is absurd. Now we go to our 5th and final tier, Tier 5. We have 10 players to get through, and first, we have an interesting forward in Veeti Miettinen. Here to talk about Veeti Miettinen is Scott Wheeler, and you might know him from The Athletic. You might also know him as the author of Behind the Scenes with the Toronto Maple Leafs at the NHL Draft, a book written by Scott Wheeler, forward by Steve Dangle. Glenn, what? Yeah, I did that. Have I mentioned I wrote a forward to a book? Anyway, shut up, Steve. Here's Scott talking about Veeti Miettinen.
Veeti Miettinen. He led St. Cloud State in scoring as a freshman. His sophomore year was a bit more of an up and down year. Didn't take that next step that you'd hope for a kid his age who played as well as he had both in Finland's junior ranks and as a freshman at St. Cloud. I have big expectations for him, though, this year as a junior at St. Cloud. He's got all of the tools as far as scoring, playmaking, handling the puck, that sort of knack in in tight. The work ethic is not an issue, and then the NHL shot is really what has always defined him. He can score from mid to long range pretty consistently, and I don't think 30 points as a junior is out of the question for him. So kind of a C plus B minus prospect, but someone still worth keeping an eye on. And I think he'll come out of college, likely get an NHL contract, whether it's with the Leafs or an AHL deal somewhere else. And then you take it from there. You see what he can do in the AHL. He's an interesting player, and that shot of his will carry him pretty far. So one player that I'd keep an eye on. I think he's got real breakout potential as a junior at St. Cloud with the Huskies.
I'll have to keep an eye there on Vidi. Next prospect, I'm sure you all know about at least a little bit. Curtis Douglas. I mean, you've definitely noticed him. Played on the Toronto Marlies last year, and if you watched any Marlies games, you might remember Curtis Douglas as the guy who's 6'9", 243 pounds. Not everyone loves his skating. Not everyone loves his game. Yeah, I'm sorry. He's too enormous to not at least look at. Even if his game's got faults, the guy's only 22. 13 goals, 21 assists for 31 points in 67 games with the Toronto Marlies last season. I think it's possible he makes the NHL. I think it's possible he plays games this year. And I do find it hilarious that portions of Leafs Nation are like, oh yeah, Kyle Clifford, they should send him down, and oh yeah, Wayne Simmons, they should send him down. Can you imagine a Marlies team with all three of Kyle Clifford, Curtis Douglas, and Wayne Simmons potentially on the same line? It's not going to happen, but could you imagine? Heck, it could happen in the NHL given the right circumstances. I'm sorry, if you're a Leaf fan, you're cheering for Curtis Douglas. You have to. Imagine if the Leafs hit on that. Imagine. And he wasn't even drafted by them. He was drafted by the Dallas Stars, and they just let him go. At very least, he is a decent AHL contributor, and at most, he plays in the NHL with your team and becomes everyone else's problem. Up next, super not the same size, Semyon Dur-Argachintsev. I go back and forth with Semyon. Sometimes he's tier 4, sometimes he's tier 5. Right now, he's tier 5, and it's not even a knock on him. It's just I feel other players in the Leafs prospect system have surpassed him. But he's still just 22. He's playing in the preseason, and every preseason he's must watch. He's definitely got the hustle. You have to give him that. 32 points in 51 AHL games. Staying healthy is so crucial for him. NHL call-up this year? I doubt it, but it's possible if they need help up front, especially on the middle. Our next 4 Leaf prospects are all Russian forwards in kind of interesting circumstances. First, we have Dmitry Ovchinnikov. He just turned 20, super productive season in the MHL in Russia. He had a brief cup of coffee with the Marlies last season, 2 goals in 7 games, that's fine. But fans started to get excited that he was going to stick around in North America. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So he goes back to Russia, but he's in the KHL, which for a 20-year-old is really good. Except, so far this season, he has 1 assist in 11 KHL games. Now, does that mean he sucks? No. Listen, if you're a young player in the KHL and you're really good, they'll give you ice time in the KHL. But if you're a young player and you're sort of in the lineup, like your 4th line, they might not even play you. Like, your odds of getting above 7 or 8 minutes a game are very low. And at this point, I think being in the KHL might actually be hurting Dmitry Ovchinnikov's development. Like, I'd rather him play in the VHL, the MHL. I wish he stayed in so he could play in the AHL. It might even be better for him to play in the ECHL than nothing in the K. Which brings us to the most egregious example of that, Nikita Gerbyankin. Now, if you don't know who that is, that's because he was just drafted this year in the 5th round. He's 6'2". He's 19, so he was a little bit older than most draft picks. But he was well over a point a game in the lower levels in Russia, and now he's in the KHL this year. He's playing in the KHL this year, where he's had several games where he's played 2 minutes or less. Why? Why even dress the guy? Who thought? What makes anybody, anywhere, think it's a good idea? Why? Like, sometimes KHL teams have it out for players who have aspirations to go into the NHL or NHL draft picks. He might not leave. If you treat him well, he might not leave. And I don't want to put words in his mouth. I don't know the guy, but I gotta be thinking those nights where he's playing 2 minutes or less, he's thinking, get me out of here as fast as possible. I'm putting him in tier 5 because he showed so much promise last season, and the Leafs thought enough about him to draft him in 2022, but holy smokes, release Nikita, man. We need him to play. Politics in the KHL are exhausting sometimes, exhausting. Next player, he's another young guy who I was really excited about last year. Pavel Gogalev. And he played with the Guelph Storm, and he wasn't even on an NHL contract, but he played so well with a not very good Marlies team that he earned an NHL deal. Last season was absolutely brutal for Gogalev. 3 goals, 5 assists for 8 points in 31 AHL games with the Marlies last season. I'm going to remind everyone that he's a forward. He got sent down to the ECHL with the Newfoundland Growlers, and he was incredible with them. He had 20 points in 14 games. Yes, he's still just 22, but he needs to have a big year with the Marlies, or he might be off the list next year. If things don't work out again, Dubas loves a little move. I could see him trading Gogalev just to free up the contract spot. Then there's Mikhail Abramov, who you might remember in a previous prospect pyramid, Scott Wheeler raved about. He was so good, so productive in the QMJHL. Professional hockey in the American Hockey League has not been as kind. He's still only 21, but his production was way down in the AHL, which was to be expected, but it was like way down. And hurting him even more right now is the fact that he's hurt, and he's not in Leafs camp because he's hurt, and he's not playing preseason games because he's hurt, and that hurts. We're down to our final few Leaf prospects, and we end with our Tier 5 defenseman. Since he was drafted, William Villeneuve had the prospect geeks in a bit of a spat. All sorts of offensive talents in the QMJHL. Doesn't really know how to play defense. That could be a problem for a defender. Scott Wheeler would like to talk about him for this video, so have at it, Scott.
William Villeneuve, fresh off winning a Memorial Cup, fresh off a season where he led the QMJHL in goal differential. He was a plus 60 in that league, obviously on a top team in the Sea Dogs, who were upset in the first round of the QMJHL playoffs before having all of that time off, coming back, regrouping, and winning the Memorial Cup. But Williams, he's come a long way. He was a pretty raw player heading into his draft year, had performed well on a terrible St. John Sea Dogs team into his draft year, but had some issues, gap control, skating, some of his decision-making. He has worked very hard in concert with the Leafs staff to figure those things out, to really put it all together and find his game. I'm looking forward to watching him with the Marlies this year. I think he's got an opportunity to become a second or third pairing guy there, to play regular minutes, and to put together a solid rookie season as a 20 and 21-year-old defenseman in the AHL. And I still believe that he's got an opportunity at some point, not in the near future, but age 23, 24, if they invest in him, if they keep him around, it would not surprise me in the least if he became a number 5, number 6, number 7 defenseman, an option at the very least for them. So 2 of the more unheralded prospects in the pool, but I really like Miettinen as a breakout candidate as a junior. And I really, quite frankly, like Villeneuve as stepping in to have an impact. He was one of the very best defensemen in junior hockey last year.
Yeah, again, Villeneuve is one of many Leafs players who we've had our eyes on over the last few years, who's finally making the jump to pro. I'm interested to see how he does. One of my favorite names in the Leafs system, Axel Rindell. He's 22, that's good. Plays defense, that's good. Shoots right, oh, that's good. Last season, he had 1 goal and 11 assists for 12 points in 26 games with Karpat in the Finnish League. Here's the problem if you're a right-handed defenseman for Karpat in the Finnish League. That's where Topi Niemela plays. And if you're a right-shooting defenseman on the team that Topi Niemela plays on, it's going to be hard to get ice time. Definitely going to be hard to get on the power play. But just because it doesn't look like he's as good as Niemela right now doesn't mean there's nothing there, and it doesn't mean he's not going to eventually, potentially, make an impact in North America. Our last player here on this prospect pyramid, who was obviously a really popular guy with the Leafs when they were in that weird Canadian division, Mac Hollowell. I don't know what day this is going to be released, but he turns 24 on September 26th, and it's tough to be a 24-year-old prospect, especially one that's 5'9", $170. I don't know how much bigger he's really going to get. He had 5 goals and 21 assists for 26 points in 45 AHL games last season. That's good. But with the Leafs prospect system, like, deceptively full of young guys on defense, time's running out for Mac Hollowell, and he's got to take a big step. I wonder with a guy like Joey Duzak not on the Toronto Marlies anymore, if maybe that frees up a power play opportunity for Mac Hollowell. I also know the Marlies are prioritizing their younger prospects. What does that spell for Mac Hollowell? I'm not sure. Because is he a call-up option? I believe he's been called up. He never played, though. Big season for Mac Hollowell. And folks, that's it. We've done all the players for the 2022 Leafs Prospect Pyramid. This is the first one that producer Drew has edited Was it fun? Super glad that I didn't do it for the first time. Super glad. You enjoyed it, didn't you? I hope you enjoyed it, because this video, we do it every year, but it's always one of the more difficult ones to make. It requires a lot of prep, a lot of research, and as you know, I don't always get it right. Like that time I called Nick Robertson a defenseman, which, by the way, nope, still no. What do you think of this year's prospect pyramid? Leave a comment in the comment box down below. But for now, that is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you like this video. Click subscribe if you really liked it. Tell your friends. Who knows how many videos we got left in this room. Oh God, I'm gonna miss it. I like it here.